Rewriting this powerful narrative while maintaining the original length, thrill, and emotional intensity requires expanding descriptive elements and deepening the emotional portrayal. December 31st, 2024. That date is etched into my memory, a scar that will never truly fade. I am Dahlia Janigan, 71 years young, and on that night, my own son shattered my heart with words that still burn deep inside my soul. If you are reading this, please understand that what happened to me can happen to any mother who has given absolutely everything for her children. I had prepared the most magnificent New Year's Eve feast, the culmination of days of agonizing effort. I approached Marcus with a hesitant smile and posed a question I am now profoundly ashamed to have uttered. Where is my gift? Marcus's reaction was a chilling, cruel laugh, a sound that held an unfamiliar malice in his eyes. Then came the words that replay like a curse every night. Santa doesn't bring presents for ungrateful people. I simply nodded, choking back a torrent of tears, and retreated to the solitude of my small bedroom. But what unfolded 3 hours later was a betrayal much, much worse. Marcus called, his voice now desperate, a pleading, childlike wail cutting through the night. "Mom, we urgently need $2 million to save the house." In that instant, something fundamental and unbreakable snapped inside me. I returned his cruelty with cold indifference. "Ask Santa Claus for it," I replied, and hung up. To comprehend how I reached that point of complete emotional breakdown, I must tell you my story from its lonely start. There was Preston, my dear husband, an electrician who worked relentlessly, day and night, to secure a decent life for us. I can still feel the memory of his calloused hands softly stroking my face after his exhausting shifts. "Dahlia," he'd whisper, "this boy is going to be our pride and joy." How terribly wrong my sweet Preston was. When he was snatched away from us in a horrific construction accident, Marcus was only 12. I was left utterly alone, and that boy instantly became my sole reason for survival. I sold every valuable possession. I labored, cleaning homes, ironing mountains of other people's clothes, and selling baked goods from a makeshift stall on the corner. My hands grew rough, my back perpetually bent from carrying the weight of my responsibilities. Yet, every single sacrifice felt worthwhile if it meant a better life for Marcus. I enrolled him in the best schools I could stretch to afford. I bought him designer clothes while I wore the same threadbare, faded skirt for years. When he was hungry, I consistently gave him my own meal, assuring him I'd already eaten. Marcus grew into a handsome, sharp, and successful man. I swelled with pride when acquaintances would tell me, "What a wonderful son you have, Dahlia." Then, Blair Hawthorne slithered into his life. She was stunningly beautiful and elegantly cold, draped in scarlet dresses that cost more than my entire 6-month salary. From our first meeting, I instinctively knew this woman didn't want me anywhere near her man. Blair had an insidious way of making me feel microscopic. "Dahlia," she'd ask with a saccharine fake smile while possessively stroking my son's arm, "don't you think it's time Marcus and I had some intimacy?" And Marcus, my Marcus, who used to defend me against the world, began to transform. He started to see me through Blair's eyes, a nuisance, an obstacle. Our family dinners became tense, suffocating affairs. I would spend hours preparing his childhood favorites, the collard greens, the homemade mac and cheese, only for him to barely touch them. "Mom, Blair prefers more sophisticated cuisine," he would say, deliberately avoiding my gaze. I gradually became a stranger in my own house, the home Preston and I had built with blood, sweat, and infinite love. Blair's constant redecorating was a relentless process of erasure. "This house needs a more modern touch, don't you think, Marcus?" she'd coo. Each new, sterile change chipped away at Preston's memory, annihilating the ghosts of our happy family life. I sought refuge in my small spare room, the last pocket of the house Blair hadn't yet contaminated. There, I cherished photos of Preston, the love letters from our courtship, and the drawings Marcus made as a boy, declaring I was the prettiest mom in the world. That New Year's Eve, December 31st, began like the last few occasions. I was relegated to solitary work in the kitchen while Marcus and Blair primped for their celebration. I had been working since 6 a.m. The glazed ham, the buttered mashed potatoes, the sweet potato pie, 30 years of perfection, agonizingly prepared. My joints ached fiercely. At 71 hours on my feet was torture. But I desperately wanted this night to be perfect, hoping to momentarily reclaim the Marcus who hugged me and called me the best mother in the universe. Blair descended the stairs in a glittering gold gown, radiating a queenly perfection. She glanced at my old yellow dress, the only decent garment I owned, with undisguised disdain. "Dahlia, don't you have anything more appropriate for the occasion?" she asked with that condescending smile. Marcus appeared, immaculate in his black suit, and bypassed me completely, whispering something in Blair's ear that made her laugh. "Mom," he said without a shred of eye contact, "Blair and I will be with our guests in the main living room. You can stay in the kitchen if you'd like." "My guests," he said, treating me like the hired help in my own home. All night, I heard their laughter, their clinking toasts, their celebration. I remained in the kitchen, serving the food I made, clearing the dirty plates, and scrubbing their messes. When the clock struck midnight and the joyous New Year's cries erupted, I was alone, washing glasses in the sink. Tears streamed into the soapy water. It was then I resolved to approach them. He was my son. It was my house. It was my right to be with them. When I entered the living room, the conversation halted. Blair stared at me as if an unwelcome phantom had materialized. The strangers watched with curious, cold eyes. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "and where is my gift?" The silence was crushing. Marcus exchanged a look with Blair before letting out that nightmare-inducing, cruel laugh. "Santa doesn't bring presents for ungrateful people," he announced, as his friends joined in the mockery. Blair added the final, decisive thrust. "Dahlia, I think it's very late for you. Shouldn't you be sleeping?" I walked to my room, feeling like a reprimanded child. I sat on my small bed, clutching Preston's photo, and wept as I hadn't since the day of his funeral. "Preston," I whispered to his image, "our son is lost. I don't know where the boy we loved so much went." But at 3 a.m., the phone shrieked. It was Marcus. All his arrogance was gone, replaced by desperation. "Mom, please help me. We need $2 million urgently, or we will lose everything." For the first time in years, my son needed me. But that night had forever changed the woman inside. "Ask Santa Claus for it," I replied, and ended the call. The following days became a waking nightmare. Marcus grew increasingly desperate and aggressive. Blair's elegance vanished. She stalked around in pajamas, dark circles under her eyes, screaming at Marcus to get the money, no matter what. "It's your mother," Blair shrieked. "She has to have something saved. All old people keep money stashed away." Marcus began rifling through my few belongings, searching for a mythical fortune. "Mom, I know Dad left you something," he pleaded, his eyes bloodshot. He always talked about having plans, about making sure we were well taken care of. But there was nothing. Preston's death was too sudden. We were left with debt and the child. One evening, I clearly overheard their catastrophic argument. I told him it was a safe investment. Marcus shouted. "Louise assured me we'd triple the money in 6 months." Blair responded hysterically, "You're an idiot. You gave $2 million to a scammer, and now the private creditors want their money or they'll take the house." The truth was out. My son had mortgaged our family home, the fruit of Preston's grueling labor, to invest in a Ponzi scheme. And now they expected me, a 71-year-old living on a meager social security check, to be their savior. 3 days after New Year's, Marcus and Blair came downstairs with their suitcases. "Mom," Marcus said, unable to meet my eyes, "Blair and I are going to stay at her sister's house for a few days." "And me?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "You? You're an adult, Mom. It's time for you to be independent." Blair smiled, a dagger in her voice. "Dahlia, it's time for you to stop being a burden to Marcus. He has his own life to live." They left. They abandoned me in that cavernous, cold house, penniless and alone. That night, sitting in the kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals, where I had mourned Preston, I realized my life, as I knew it, was utterly finished. But this apparent tragedy was about to become the greatest revelation of my life. The days after their departure were the darkest. I was completely alone. The huge house became a mausoleum of agonizing memories. The fridge was bare. Marcus had taken what little food there was. Every noise startled me. I tried calling Marcus, but he either ignored me or answered with glacial detachment. "Mom, I already told you. Blair and I need our space. You have to learn to fend for yourself. Look for a nursing home or something like that. I can't carry you for the rest of my life." A week later, a tall man in a grey suit appeared. "Mrs. Janigan," he asked. "I am Mr. Garcia. I represent your son Marcus's creditors. I am here to notify you that this property will be foreclosed in 30 days if the $2 million debt is not settled." I collapsed, hearing that Marcus had mortgaged the property using forged documents certifying him as the sole owner. With my pitiful savings, I rented a cramped, tiny room in a dilapidated boarding house in South Atlanta. The place was depressing, mold-stained walls, a shared bathroom, and a mattress so old my back screamed every morning. The landlady, a large woman named Ms. Cleo, eyed me with contempt. "I expect prompt payment," she'd bark, "because I don't give charity to anyone here." My routine became a mechanical sorrow: wake, eat stale bread and tea, and search for work no one would give a 71-year-old. I returned, exhausted and hopeless, to listen to the screams of other tenants through the thin walls. One afternoon, downtown, I saw Marcus and Blair emerging from an expensive midtown restaurant. She was in a new violet dress. He looked relaxed, happy, utterly carefree. I hid behind a telephone pole, watching them laugh and kiss. Blair carried a leather purse that cost more than my 3 months' rent. Marcus wore a new, gleaming watch. They clearly had money, but not for the family home or his mother. I called him that night. "What do you want, Mom?" he answered impatiently. I told him where I was, begging for help. "Mom, I already told you to be independent. Blair and I have our own expenses. But I saw you today. You have money to spend on luxuries, but not to help your mother." "That is not your problem," he screamed. "Stop spying on me and find a way to sort out your life." And he hung up. My heart shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. My situation worsened. Ms. Cleo raised the rent: "Pay up or get out." I had spent my last savings on arthritis medication. One night, while packing to find an even cheaper hovel, I found an old showbox I'd brought from the house, where I kept trivial documents. Nostalgically, I began sifting through it: love letters, birth certificates, old bills. At the very bottom, wrapped in yellow plastic, was an envelope I had never seen, addressed to me in Preston's handwriting. My heart hammered. I opened it with trembling hands. "My dearest Dahlia," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I know you always worried that we didn't have much money saved, but I want you to know that we do. For years, I have been secretly investing to secure your future and Marcus's." I couldn't breathe. Preston continued, "At the First American Reserve Bank, account number 847629, there is $200,000 that I've been saving. But that's not all. I also bought stock in the Georgia Power Company where I worked, and according to my calculations, it must be worth much more now." The letter ended with instructions to see a lawyer named Mr. Julian Vance. I was paralyzed. Preston had kept this secret for so long. After months of suffering and humiliation, there was a way out. More than the money, the realization that Preston had always thought of me, always wanted to protect me even after death, brought me to my knees. The next day, I would find Mr. Julian Vance. That night, for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully. I dreamed of Preston, and he hugged me, saying, "You don't have to suffer anymore, my love. It's time for you to be respected as you deserve." At 8 a.m., I stood before the imposing glass building where Julian Vance worked. My hands were slick with sweat. The receptionist was surprised but immediately directed me to Mr. Vance, a distinguished man in his 50s. "You are Dahlia, Preston's wife?" he asked with a warm smile. "Mrs. Janigan," I have been waiting for you to appear for almost 15 years. Julian explained that Preston was incredibly prudent. He didn't just save money, he made very intelligent investments. The Georgia Power Company shares split several times and their value multiplied exponentially. Julian opened a thick file. Mrs. Janigan, you don't just own $200,000. Between the savings accounts, the stock investments, and the government bonds Preston bought, your current estate is approximately $3 million. The world tilted. $3 million. While I was starving in that boarding house, a fortune awaited. But that's not all, Julian continued. Preston also fully paid off the house where you lived. I have the original deed and title here, which proves the property is in your name, not your son's. But Marcus mortgaged the house, I whispered, confused. Julian frowned. That is impossible. Only the legal owner can mortgage a property. If your son did that, he committed serious fraud. The magnitude of the betrayal hit me. Marcus had not only abandoned me but had forged documents to steal my house. We need to act quickly, Julian urged. We'll go to the bank immediately, and then we will file a complaint for fraud against your son. I hesitated, but Julian looked at me gravely. Mrs. Janigan, your son left you living in misery while having access to money that wasn't his. This is not just family betrayal. It is a felony. At the bank, it was all confirmed. It was real. What do you want to do with the money? The manager asked. For now, leave it where it is, I replied. I returned to my miserable room, but I was no longer an abandoned woman. I was a woman with resources, with power. It was time to show them how wrong they were. The next day, Julian called with even more shattering news. Mrs. Janigan, I've been investigating the situation with your house, and I found something very interesting. The creditors Marcus owes money to don't seem to exist. The whole story about the $2 million debt appears to be a lie. What do you mean? I believe your son and daughter-in-law are trying to scam you. They likely invented the whole debt story so you would give them money they thought you had hidden. The betrayal was now exquisitely cruel. They had tried to rob me with an elaborate, manipulative lie. A white-hot rage, an emotion I had never felt before, burned in my chest. I called Marcus, but this time I wasn't pleading. Hello, Marcus, I said calmly. Mom, how are you? He asked, his voice dripping with false concern. I'm fine. In fact, I'm better than ever. Marcus, I wanted to ask you a question about the house. I wanted to know exactly which documents you used to mortgage it. A long silence. Mom, why are you asking that? I already explained that. Just answer my question, Marcus. His voice became visibly nervous. I used the documents Dad left me. That's interesting, because I just found out that Dad never left you any documents for the house. I'll see you soon. I hung up. Julian hired a private investigator named Avery who followed Marcus and Blair. The report was devastating. Mrs. Janigan, your son and daughter-in-law have been living a life of extreme luxury. They spent more than $50,000 in the last month alone. Avery showed me pictures. Marcus and Blair at a luxury spa, toasting with champagne. Where did they get so much money? Blair comes from a very wealthy family. Her father owns several companies and she has access to an account with several $100,000. They never needed your help. It was all an elaborate performance. Then Avery dropped the final bombshell. I also discovered that they have been telling their friends that you died. They had erased me completely. The news ignited a fierce, unshakable determination. I was going to remind them that Dahlia Janigan was very much alive. Julian and I went straight to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office. We filed the formal complaint for real estate fraud. Detective Reynolds, the officer in charge, was methodical. This is a very clear case of documentary fraud. Your son could face between 5 and 10 years in state prison for this. We gave them the address of the Piedmont Grand Hotel, where the investigator confirmed they were staying. Afterward, Julian helped me open a new account and transferred $1 million for immediate use. The bank manager assured me, with this capital, you could live comfortably without ever working again. Your passive income would be approximately $12,000 a month. $12,000 a month, while Marcus left me to survive on less than $300. I took the next step. I rented the presidential suite at the Piedmont Grand Hotel, the very place Marcus and Blair were staying. I bought new clothes, had my hair done, and chose a sophisticated coral dress. When I looked in the mirror, I saw the dignified woman Preston had loved, reborn. That night, I called Marcus from the suite's private line. "Mom, where are you calling from? I don't recognize this number." "Hello, Marcus. How is life at the Piedmont Grand Hotel?" Blair's perfectly manicured facade shattered. She let out a guttural shriek of fury and despair, collapsing dramatically onto the Italian leather sofa. "This is a nightmare. My father will hear about this." I looked at her, dressed in her simple orange clothes, her face streaked with tears, and saw only a petty, spoiled woman. "Your father will hear about the consequences of your actions, Blair, just as Marcus is about to learn about the consequences of his." The officers escorted a weeping, mumbling Marcus out of the presidential suite. He turned one last time at the door, his eyes filled with genuine panic. "Mom, please, I'll pay you back. I'll be the son you always wanted." I walked over to the immense window overlooking the entire city, the city where I had cleaned houses and sold baked goods to raise him. I needed the son I always wanted when I was sleeping on that miserable mattress, not when you are standing in handcuffs, I told him. "The time for being the son I always wanted is over, Marcus. You asked Santa Claus for $2 million, and now you have the gift of accountability." The door closed, sealing his fate and ending my years of anguish. Julian Vance returned a few minutes later, looking immensely relieved. "It's done, Mrs. Janigan. The wheels of justice are turning. We have secured the house deed in your name, and the fraud case is strong." I looked around the beautiful suite, feeling the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. "Julian, I want to go home now. Not this suite. My home. The one Preston bought." 3 days later, I was back in the house. Marcus's and Blair's few remaining luxury items, the expensive liquor, the designer coats, were all gone, sold off to cover some immediate legal costs. I didn't redecorate or change anything. I simply brought my old shoebox, my photos of Preston, and my childhood drawings of Marcus into the main living room. I sat on the very sofa where I had watched Marcus and Blair celebrate, and finally ate a meal in the dining room, not a lavish feast, but a simple dinner of collard greens and mac and cheese, cooked just for myself. I remembered the little boy, the boy who called me the prettiest mom, and I mourned his loss, but I no longer mourned my loss. A week later, I received a final, desperate letter from Marcus, sent from jail. He was facing significant time. The letter was full of regret, but beneath the apology, the entitlement still flickered. He asked if I could possibly send money for a better lawyer. I looked at the letter, then at Preston's photograph. I picked up my pen and wrote a concise reply, signing it and sending it back. "To Marcus Janigan. The $2 million that you and Blair needed to save your house turned out to be a lie. My love for you, however, was not. But love cannot save a man from the consequences of his greed. Ask your father-in-law for a lawyer. I have chosen to use Preston's money to finally live the dignified life he intended for me. Sincerely, Dahlia Janigan, homeowner and beneficiary." I never heard from him again. Dahlia Janigan now travels the world, supports charities for single mothers, and lives every day with the comfort and respect she earned 1,000 times over. She no longer seeks a gift, she is the gift. And that, I know, is what my dear Preston wanted all along.